humans. You are here to think out loud with me. I am Natalie Peterson, casting in from my little neck of the woods in northern Colorado to you in yours, wherever and whenever that might be. This digital adventure is my way of turning years of internal chatter, wondering, silent suffering, and physical and mental close calls into enlightening and empowering conversations with others. I've been looking forward to visiting with my guest today, Grace C.W. Blue, the Woman's Truth Awakener and a professional communication navigator. You all know I'm a communications junkie, so any chance I get to think out loud with someone who has an angle on how a human says, acts, demonstrates what's in their mind and body and spirit, well, I am all over that. Grace has a particular forte of working with introverts. Before I dive into all my questions, I want you to meet her. She grew up as a Chinese American with traditional Chinese parents who taught her that girls are to be seen and not heard. Her duty was to obey her parents and authority figures, and she was taught and learned that her thoughts and opinions didn't count. Today, Grace's passion is to help introverted, shy, quiet women speak their truth and embody their worthiness by overcoming what she has termed stagnant communication syndrome. She empowers women to clearly communicate without anxiety, without fear or over-explaining, so that they can have better relationships at home and at work and more success in their careers. In addition to her honest and deep lived experience, Grace has a long and successful career in speech language pathology, and she has worked her butt off to launch her own with Grace Solutions and offer her mind and guidance in programs for executives and individuals who wish to break through limitations and step into inspired, confident lives. Grace, thank you for thinking out loud with me today. I'm glad we're here together to get to know each other better and share more about your magic.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak on your show today. Think Out Loud. I'm just overly excited to be able to speak with you and to share with your audience.
I love it. I love it. And I have to tell everybody, when you first came on with your adorable shirt, she's got a sloth on her t-shirt, and we were just talking about it is a slothy Saturday, even though we're buzzing around and doing things that, yeah, Saturdays are for sloths. Here we are. It's so cool to have you. So tell me, I was just sharing with you what I hoped to accomplish in our time together today. And so much of who you are, which is, I guess I'm saying something pretty obvious, so much of who each of us is our upbringing and the molding that happens after we come into this world by folks with the best intentions as parents, right? But the molding that happens to us as young people in our upbringings. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about your own life as a young person, and just this more girls are meant to be seen and not heard, and how that shaped you as the person you are today.
Yes. So, I'm sure some of you might have heard growing up that girls are to be seen and not heard, and especially in the Asian community, that is more so. As you may be well aware of, in the Asian communities, it's, the boys are the important because they carry on the family's name. The girls, not so much, right? So girls are meant to just do what the parents say because they're going to be married to other family members. So their duty is to listen and follow, the guidance of, the in-laws and what have you. And so, and also the other part of the Asian community is that they think highly of education, like the professions of doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, all that. And I wasn't really into becoming a doctor or, an accountant or engineer. And some of you might, some of your listeners might relate to that. Like your passion is somewhere else, And so a lot of the times, my parents would tell me, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a, this or that. They already had this plan in their head, the path I was going to take. And when I went to school, on the Western culture side with my teachers and peers, like the teacher would ask, I remember like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, there were like answers like, I want to be a fireman and, astronaut, or I want to be a ballerina and, dance with unicorns, anything was possible. And when it came to my turn, like, what do you want to be? I said, doctor, lawyer, because that's what my mom and dad told me that I can be. So it was already, for me, it was like, I didn't know, and what I wanted to be, because I only could say, like, my parents said I was going to be this, so I guess that's what I'm going to be.
That's interesting to think about, because it wasn't about a fear of dreaming of something. It just was that it wasn't possible.
It wasn't even an option for me, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So imagine, if you can, like, you're living your life as such, where you're being told what to be, what to say, what, all that, how your self-worth, how your opinion, how your view yourself starts to diminish. So this is where I coined the stagnant communication syndrome, because what happens is when you start to diminish, you feel like when you go out into the community, when you're no longer with your parents, at least this is what I felt, and maybe others can relate, is all of a sudden when people start to ask you, like your coworkers, your spouse or partner, whoever starts to ask you, like, what do you want? Even like, what do you want for dinner and stuff? All of a sudden I found myself saying, oh, whatever you want. Or you decide, or I don't know, whatever you go with is good. Even though I had an opinion, I wasn't able to share it because I was taught, right? It was ingrained that you just listen to your parents, your thoughts and opinions don't count. And so what happens is you carry that with you to other places. And then you get into a stagnant communication syndrome, where you're like going, geez, even if I say something, they probably won't listen to me anyway. Or my opinions and thoughts don't count because of the story that you've told yourself, because of your past experiences and, things that you have learned. So what happens is, if you think of like stagnant water, right, it becomes all muddy and yucky and unclear. And when you feel in that stagnant communication syndrome, where you feel like nobody's hearing you or listening to you or want to listen or hear what you have to say because you taught that story to yourself, then you feel like you're stuck, right? And then you feel like that muddiness, that ickiness, because you're like going, I want to have people hear me and value me and what have you, but one thing I've learned is has to come from within. So you have to feel like that worthiness first and feel worthy to speak. And then when you feel that worthiness, then you can feel like that worthiness to speak. So it's kind of like, you first have to work on yourself to figure out how to now change your story, right? To get out of that.
So what was the turning point for you? I mean, you have all of this ingrained in you, and was there, like, do you remember the age or a situation or a time in your life, like, that you started questioning that something was tickling you to be like, you know what, this doesn't jive with who I want to be? Like, can you put words around that part of your life where it shifted for you?
Yeah, so actually it didn't happen until about my 30s, actually, because, I was in that same pattern for so long. And it was just when I had an argument with my husband that we got into a very huge argument that he literally almost couldn't take it anymore. So he ran his head against the wall pretty hard, because it was just like, at that point, it was just like, because I was saying things to him that my parents said to me.
Mm.
And it wasn't a very nice words. Let's just put it that way. And this is where I also in my program teach the importance of words, because, what I realize is, we say a lot of words, but really there's energy in words. There's energy in communication. There's energy in our tone of voice. There's energy in our body language and all of that. And it's so when I saw my husband, when we had that big argument that, that he was just like so angry that he wanted to hit himself against the wall like that, it was a turning point for me, because it was just like, I don't ever want something to happen to my husband, because, we love each other. But the way I was speaking to him and, the words, the tone of voice, all of that didn't show that, right? And so that's when that was a turning point. Like I started to learn about energy, and I started to learn about, healing, like Reiki and crystals and chakras and centers. And that also led me to the human design part of it all, and all that, because it's all energy. And so then I realized, okay, I need to change. I needed to change the way I communicated, and by understanding the energy of words, tone of voice, all of that.
That you came to that awareness, like to take ownership of that and say, okay, I am going to I have to take responsibility for my part in this and do the work, is like, that's a massive lift. And I don't think that a lot of the world ever gets to that point where they see themselves as the common denominator in, in situations that are stacking up, where we can actually stop long enough and look back at ourselves and say, okay, hold on. This happened and I was this way. That happened and I was this way. This started happening and I was this way. And I'm the one here that's the same in all of this. And if any of this is going to change, I'm going to have to be the one to change. That is such a massive lift for anybody. And I just I want to just recognize that in you as, what a beautiful thing to have happen. Is your husband Chinese American as well?
No, my husband is Scottish. So the thing was, is that I grew up in that pattern of argument and not being careful of the words and, the whole body language, the whole thing, because my parents were like that. My grandparents were like that. My aunts and uncles, that's how they always, so I was around me and I thought that was the norm, until I saw my husband, because he's Scottish, and his family communicated very differently, and so when that happened, because I was like, I don't want everyone to lose my husband, and everything. And so it was kind of like that wake up call, like, oh, this is, I'm in a danger zone kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And, and because again, I just saw the patterns from my parents, grandparents, and I was like going, if I don't change, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it was just like, okay. So yeah, so that was a big wake up call, and the thing was, is that I didn't understand my husband's communication style. And that's why it got to be the way it did. And so when I started to learn about energy of communication, like the words, body language, and tone of voice and everything, that led me to understanding, like, there's, we all have personalities, and there's like all these different personality quizzes. And I don't know about you, but I'm really interested in knowing more about me, right? So I'm always taking all these quizzes and all this other stuff. And So, and I also learned from others, like all these different personalities, like what motivates them, all this other stuff. And then I kind of came down to like, there's like kind of a 4 different types of communication styles
Okay.
that people have. So I came up with like the fireball, the nurture, the diplomatic, and the humorous.
Fireball, nurturer, diplomatic, and humorous.
Yes.
Okay, I want to dig in. So the fireball and right off the bat, like, can people shift between these 4? Are they always one and some of the others?
Yes. So what happens is like, so you're it comes from like what motivates you from within, and then
Yeah.
there might be some other external factors that play a part in everything, and
Yep.
then so like the fireballs are the ones that are fired up. They have like this, like so passionate, like they are like results, and they know exactly what they're gonna go for, and all this other stuff, right? The nurturers, they like to provide the guidance and the support. The diplomatic, they're more of like finding the balance and, finding more of the peaceful serenity, way. And
Yep.
then the humorous, they're the ones that like to find the joy and the enjoyment in a conversation. And so with the humorous, if the discussion gets to be too serious or too heavy, they might be the ones that throw in a little bit of humor or something to try to help to lighten up the mood, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, however, like with anything, there's the strength and the weaknesses, right?
Okay. Yep.
So with the fireball, yes, they're fired up. And if you have a plan, they're going to try to motivate you and get you the results. But sometimes they can appear to be kind of aggressive, right? Like
Yep.
in your face, type people. The nurturer, too much nurturing, too much hand holding, always around, trying to make sure that every step is done so that you don't make mistakes or falter because they want to prevent you from having that. Might feel very smothering. The diplomatic, yes, they're open to ideas and hearing what other people say, but sometimes too many ideas can be overwhelming that they almost like don't make a decision because then all of a sudden they become like overwhelmed with so much, they become like kind of maybe indecisive, or you're not really sure where they're standing on. And then the humorous, if not done correctly, because yes, they want to lighten up the mood, but if it's not done in the right timing or the right way, they can appear to be insensitive, right? So, and just to say, like, there's no good or bad, communication styles. And so, yes, you can almost have one very predominant communication styles, but again, because of the motivation, your personality, you might have one or two, a very primary one and a bit of a secondary one, and possibly even maybe a third, but for the most part, you'll find that you'll be like definitely one and possibly two, of the communication style.
2 things bubble up for me. A strength overused is a weakness, right?
Yep.
So to that point of the fireball driving too hard, right? And running over the top of folks, to the other side of things, inappropriate humor, ill-timed humor. Like, really? Is this really? Can you take things serious? Right?
Yeah.
Totally get that. Totally relate to that. And then the second thing is that I can completely relate to the fireball. I can relate to all 4 of those. What comes to my mind is that over time, or that certain circumstances demand of you to be a fireball, perhaps, when you're really a nurturer. and that there's an incongruence that happens internally where, say, you're in a situation that's demanding that you take ownership, it's demanding that you drive, but really you're more inclined um to nurture folks and to bring about change by serving others and wrapping them into conversation. Maybe that's more diplomatic, but um talk to me about like how we put ourselves into situations where we think we have a solution, but the situation is demanding something different of us. Is there a way out of that? Is there a way through that? What does that bring up for you?
Well, so I think I'll kind of bring back because you're talking about, say, the fireball. Yes, they want the results, right? But that's not to say that the nurturer don't want results, but the nurturers are going to get results and getting it by being supportive or finding people that can support them if they're wanting to be receiving the nurture, because they're nurturing, so they might want to have that nurturing partner as well. So they might say, okay, I want results, but I want it in a gentle way. So they might go and talk to somebody who's more of that nurturing person rather than, yes, they might have somebody who's a fireball in their corner, but for that particular project, they might say, I need to find this person that I know who's more of this communication style per se to help me through this, because although the fireball will get me the results, but perhaps the way they want to help me to get the results, it's not really what I want to continue to, to have, so to speak, and then sometimes, like, the nurture, they're in, in a project, so to speak, right? And it might be very demanding project. So they might say, I need someone like my husband who's a humorist. I'm going to just say my husband's a humorous communicator. And I'll tell you the story how I found out he's a humor. I always knew he had a good humor and everything, and I knew that, but I didn't understand like that's as his style until, like I said, I started to dive into more of the communication thing, and it was just like, yep, I knew he was a humorous communication style, but it took me a while to understand why he threw in the humor the way he did. So when I was working on my project and everything, and sometimes it would be so demanding and so hard, he was now throwing a bit of humor that I understand to help to lighten it up. And I'll be like, haha, laughing, and everything. So now I get it, Back then I didn't. And that's why we had that big argument, because I thought he was so insensitive while I was going through certain things. But now that I understand, I was like, okay, I get it now. So yeah, so it just really depends. So it's not to say, that you're not motivated or any of these coming. It's just how you go about getting the results you want is going to be very different, and who you talk to help you to get through the results will depend on, what you're perhaps working on,
Absolutely.
So
knowing what I am is extremely valuable to me, and understanding what drives and motivates and how another person is wired is incredibly helpful to the conversation, is incredibly helpful to any situation. We talk about communication, we talk about nonverbal, verbal. Can you tell, and I know the answer to this is a leading question, can you tell what someone is by the words that they use and or the way that they talk?
Yeah. So, once when you start to hear the person, you'll hear like some of the key words, like the fireball might say like motivate you and get the results, and you'll see like they have big movements and they have that big voice, and they'll say, I'm blunt and I'm gonna, let you know. And so I have come across, I've, gone through some trainings, and I'll say, yep, that coach is a fireball, or I hear like people say like, I want to nurture you. This is all about relationships. We want to, and I will say, okay, that person is more of the nurturing type, and then, the one, my coach may say, we have ideas, and I want you to feel safe to share your ideas, to be open. We're here to collaborate, to learn, to do things, other stuff. So the diplomatic will be like, I want to share ideas. I want to do all these things, right? And then the humorist will go, and say, I want you to have fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth doing. We want you to have, some joy, and, not be stressed about it. This is, we're gonna keep it simple. We're gonna, all that, be inclusive.
Yeah.
All of that.
Well, and it brings, I take responsibility for me, but I also respect who you are as a communicator, so that it's not all on me. It's not all on you to adjust to me, and it's not all on me to adjust to you. But if we are like in a good team, in a good situation, like all types are respected, all types are valuable. There's no right or wrong, as you said, that in a good mix, that everyone has a role, and that a really healthy communication situation is where all of those different types have a place and are respected in what they can bring to the situation, right?
Yes.
So I'm reminded of a time early in my career. I had a gentleman, I had been promoted into management as a young person. I had very little experience managing other folks. I am by nature back then I was a fireball, we'll say it that way, with a little humorous, and depending on my mood, maybe a lot of humorous, but fireball and humorous. And so talking with my hands, talking at a higher level, talking fast, my like static words, chop, chop, questions, expecting answers. And I had an older gentleman who was on my team. His name was Walker Romer, total sweet man. And I would go into his cubicle. It was one of those just cubicle farms of, an office. And I would go in to talk to him, and I would start in on whatever I needed from him, and to engage with him. And I would watch this man just like scrunch down in his desk, like, you're like, I was in his space, I was in his face, my voice was louder, and fast forward, I got some training and some awareness around my own style, and holy crap, Walker's style. And I will never forget walking into his cubicle one day, very intentionally taking my entire tone down. I sat down in the chair in his cubicle. I put my hands underneath the backsides of my legs, and I brought my volume down, and I brought my tone down, and the speed of what I was saying. And the man turned his chair and faced me, and we engaged in a conversation that was like a complete 180 than months prior.
Yeah.
it was brilliant.
Right,
It was
right.
like in action, right?
Yeah.
And that's the level of like magic that can happen if you understand these different types of of communication styles. I
Right.
love it.
I mean, you're still a fireball, Natalie. You're still a fireball, but you were able to tone down that fireball way of communicating because the words you will still use will be like much more of the
Mm,
fireball energy
mm,
still, but you were just able to tone down a bit of that fireball just to kind of mirror a bit of what that nurture would be. So that way, you
mm-hmm,
guys could have that connection,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's all about that. And so like I was saying, like I knew my husband's, he's always been a humorist. And but when I understood the communication style, I was like, there was a shift in how we then communicated because it was like very tumultuous, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, before,
mm-hmm,
prior to my 30s and up to the 30s and stuff. And then I started understanding the energy of communication, like I mentioned, and all this other stuff, and really got into like the personalities and everything. And then that's when I started to understand like the energy of the personality, energy of the words, and then the communication styles. So when my husband then threw his communication styles at me, I was like, oh, I get it now, and wasn't upset like I was before, because again, had mentioned I was a speech therapist, speech language pathologist.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was working as a travel speech therapist at one point. And for those of you who may know about like traveling nurses and what have you, like you change one, you're in a contract for like 3 months, 6 months, however long. And then when that contract ends, you start a new contract, right? Well, there's a lot of things that needs to be done, like you're ending one to start a new one because everybody has a different policy of how they want you to get started and what have you. So during that time, I was going into transitioning. And I know like I'm very much of the nurture, like to provide the guidance and stuff. And we get hung up on some of the details, because we want to make sure that it's done properly so the transition can be as smooth as possible, right? And it was during this time like I was getting into my mood where it was like getting really deep and getting really serious and all this other stuff. And my husband puts up a picture of me with devil horns. And then the next picture that goes up is a picture of him with tears running down his eyes, snot running down his nose, and everything like that. And I understood and I busted out laughing because I'm like, okay, he's using his artistic style and I get it now. He's using his communication style to say to me, if you don't stop this path of yours, it's going to end me in tears. And then you can forget about us having any further discussion,
Mm-hmm.
So before I would have thought, how insensitive of this guy. And then I would have got into more of that snowball effect. Like, you're not
Yeah,
listening to
yeah.
me. You're not paying attention. You don't care what I say. That stagnant communication syndrome pulling me back in. And, once when I understood what he was trying to communicate to me now, I let that communication, that syndrome go because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm getting to understand. He's trying to tell me that I'm getting too serious, too deep. He can't handle it. So that's how he communicated to me. I finally understood, and I'm like going, okay, I got to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, so I like you, calm down my voice, used less, harsh and not provide so many details, just provided, okay, well, let's just focus on the first two main things that need to be done
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and all of that. So once I understood that and everything, then it was just like we were able to continue to have the conversation and the communication where before it would have just like blew up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know
And I still maintain that the brilliance in that is is you saying, what do I need to do? Because I can hear so many people, well, they don't understand me. They need to like, and it's external to us, right? Well, you aren't, you need to shift, you need to adjust, you need to step up to this. Like I have this, this conversation with in the sales world. It's like not everyone is a driver, not everyone is a fireball, not everyone is about results and motivation and all of this stuff. And so if someone is not rising to this level that you expect of yourself and where you operate, that doesn't make them a bad person. It doesn't make them less than you. It doesn't make them ineffective or unworthy of being in this conversation with you. It's just a different style that needs to be recognized and adjusted. It requires us to be self-aware and to take a damn breath and say, what do I need to do to get a different result than I'm getting?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's wrap back to the front of this when we were talking about that shift and that pivot in your own life, and what I imagine is a shift and a pivot in many of your clients' lives. And it's this determination that that you feel worthy,
Right.
this value that you understand that you bring to a situation, and that you're worthy then of communicating and speaking up. That's not easy.
No. So it's like, where did that stagnant communication syndrome come from? Like you not willing to share, or not feeling being heard, or that you can't share, or what your voice don't count. Where's that coming from? Where did you hear that in your lifetime, in your story?
So digging into that part of your story is a big part.
Right. Digging that into there. And then there's another part which is like who you are, right? So I use the human design to show people who they are, and then explain, like, where their energy is, and then using that to explain like why they might communicate the way they do, and why they might want to speak up, or when to speak up, and when it might be best to quiet, have that silence, because maybe it's coming from one of the centers, and the centers has something it wants to prove that's not necessary. So using that, so it's part of just appreciating who you are, knowing who you are, and then kind of like understanding like what stories you've been telling yourself, and capturing that. And so we talk about self-care and self-healing and what have you. So this is where, the healing, the mindset, all of that comes into play. And then, healing that part and knowing who you are and all those, so that you start to embody your self-worth again. Because when you embody your self-worth and you feel like that worthiness, then you feel like worthiness to be able to communicate and speak your truth. And then from there, you're able to have that confidence, right? To speak and to share your thoughts, opinions, and even your boundaries, right? We talk about boundaries. We hear that word thrown around, like, set healthy boundaries. And the thing is that you first, you have to know what your healthy boundaries are, but then you also have to feel that self-worth to communicate what your healthy boundaries are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a process.
So yes, so one of the ways, again, is through communication, is first knowing who you are, that's part of your story and your human design, and appreciating it, and then leaning kind of into your communication styles, right? And then incorporating the communication styles with your human design, and then understanding your energy, and understanding like why certain tone of voice might set you off, or why certain words might make you feel stuck, and what words you can replace it with. I know some of my clients had said, I hear the word balance, and that gets used a lot. But for some of them, they're like going, that seems like hard work, trying to find that balance. And so so they say, I prefer the word harmony, because harmony feels lighter. It feels like working together to create that balance rather than you finding the balance. So for some of my clients, it's about like feeling the different words, and so replacing it. So that way, if the word balance makes you feel stuck, you prefer the word harmony, meaning the same thing, then you can use the word harmony, right, to help you to then move forward. So that's,
I love that.
Some of what my clients did was, they changed the words. And then for others, it's just like, oh, I hear a certain tone of voice and it, that set me off, and then just like, okay, where did that come from? Was it because mom or dad used that tone of voice with me when, X, Y, and Z happened? Okay. So now, when you hear that tone of voice and it triggers you, you can say, okay, I see where that's coming from. And then you can heal that part. So that way, when you hear that tone of voice, it's no longer going to trigger.
Awesome. It's such a fantastic gift to be able to not necessarily, like, it's not Grace trying to create a bunch of Graces in the world. It's Grace trying to create a bunch of fantastic people on their own, standing on their own 2 feet with their own beautiful selves, right? And the magic that you bring to be able to relate to someone, telling someone that what is going to help them and what is going to be healthy for them is for them to reflect on how they perceive others, and that they have a responsibility in a situation, in a communication, in a relationship. There, this relationship just keeps going south and it's all his or her fault or what have you. To be able to have the wherewithal and the magic touch to sit with someone and say, I just want to invite you to think about what your role in this is.
Yes. Right on. And the thing is that a lot of the times we feel like we don't have control in our communication or in our conversation because of what you mentioned. It's his fault. He could shift, or she could shift, or so on and so forth. But when we start to step into our own power, like, okay, how can I make the change? Or, saying like, I want this to happen instead of I want you to do this, or this, or because when we start doing that, we're giving the power away to the other person. So it's really much about stepping into our own power. So when we say, I want this, or X, Y, and Z to happen, or, I want X, Y, and Z, or I know, and so when we change from within and just step into like right, like, then we are now in control of our communication conversation, that we no longer feel like it's outside of us. And so I like how you brought that up, Natalie, because yes, it's all about, wanting to step into our power. And that's what I want to help the introverted, shy, quiet women to do, is to start to feel like they have the power to step into their communication and conversation, that it's not outside of them. It's the control is not on the you part, or, it's you, the person has it. The person has it. They just have to step into that. And
I love it.
Yeah.
And they should, they have an ally in you. I think your background and your perspective is so honest and just very authentic. I've experienced you from the beginning as a very authentic person. So.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Well, like I said, when I had that big argument with my husband, that, when in my 30s and what have you, and that was kind of like wake up call and everything, I realized it's like, I have to make the change. Otherwise, it's, I'm going to go in the same patterns, my parents and grandparents and all of that. And so that's when I felt like, I need to do something. And that's when I felt, I would say, the power, right? And then it led me to down this path that I am on today. And I want others to know that they have the control. It's not the control given to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is what I want everybody to feel, is that the power is within you, within the person, not outside of you.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about how that person, that human that's hearing you visit with me here today, can be in touch with you because you've touched them. There's your website, Grace Solutions, and I am going to spell it because I think it's brilliant, but I want to make sure folks understand. So it's your first name, Grace, and then Solutions. Soul, like my soul, the deepest part of my beingness. Grace Solutions. Grace, SOULUTIONS. And on your website, you have a communications quiz. So all of these types that we're talking about, somebody can go plug in and it will spit out what?
So when you take the quiz, it will just tell you really quickly what your communication style is. And then it will also generate a report for you of with the details, a bit about more details about the communication style that you have, or that you
Awesome. Awesome. So if this has tickled anybody's idea of, I wonder who I am, and you want to plug into this quiz, it's a fantastic way to see how your mind works, and then how their mind works, and if there's a possibility of actually partnering to make even more brilliance. You're active on social, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm going to put all of your links in my show notes. And then you and I met, I want to plug, you and I met a little bit more closer. My English teacher mother would be appalled. You've developed a set of cards. They're not released yet, but you're working on them. And you should be extremely proud of them. And I would love for you to just share just a hair about that, so that folks can be looking out for these.
Yeah, so thank you, Nellie, for that. So yes, I am creating a card deck called You Matter, Yes You Do.
Yes.
It's all about some journal prompting questions around to help to embody the worthiness, also around the communication part. So there's like 62 different journal prompts. I figured one a day, so you've got 60 days, and there's all this different thoughts, so that way it helps you to realize your brilliance, right? These journal prompts. Also, your relationship to yourself and to others, and the way there's some journal prompts around the communication part, the energy of the words and the tone of voice, all of that. And along with that, I have a journal book. It's just like pages where you can just either write down your journal thoughts to the card deck, or you can just use it as a gratitude journal or a brainstorming, what have you. So so that'll be coming out soon. I'm excited.
It's been a lot of work for you. It's a passion project.
It has been. It absolutely has been. And the thing is that, again, we're talking about worthiness, right? And I want to say that I titled it You Matter, Yes You Do, because when you are communicating, or, the thoughts that you say to yourself, we talk about self-care. And I think a lot of part of the self-care is really also how you talk to yourself, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted to make it so that the person felt like, they matter, because they do,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so that's why I
Mhm.
titled it that way. Because again, how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to others, it's so important, because you matter, I matter, everybody matters, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so there's that part.
Yeah. I am extremely grateful that you found your self-worth. I really am, that you found whatever it was at that shift in your life that said, you know what, I'm going to dig in, and I'm not going to believe that, my voice doesn't matter. I'm not going to believe that I can't speak up if I've got a thought, or I've got an inspiration, or I've got something exciting to share. I would have loved to have known you then, and to witness that, just that coming out of this beautiful spirit that you have.
Right.
I want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you, Natalie. And it has been a difficult journey, for the most part, because didn't know how deeply you wanted me to share on this part. But if you would like, I could share this really deep part with you, because I talked about how I talked to my husband. We had that big argument. Well, that stemmed from when I was 18 years old. And I can actually now tell the story without having it like really break me down, or
Mm-hmm.
it'll destroy my worth anymore. So it has been a really long healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it stemmed from was my mother graduation, high school graduation. You remember your high school graduation. I'm sure everybody does, right? You're so excited. You're getting your diploma, because you're getting a step up towards college or living life, what have you, right? You're an adult. So on the day of graduation, I was finally got permission to wear makeup, because I wasn't allowed to wear makeup up to this point. My mom was like, no makeup. But day of my graduation, mom said, yes, you can wear makeup, and everything, because it was a special occasion. I was like, great. Well, as I was getting ready, I don't know where it stemmed from. I don't know where this anger came from. But my mom all of a sudden got angry at me because I wasn't an honor student. I was A's and B's because I wanted a bit of a social life, where my cousins, they all studied hard and they all graduated with honors. I did not. So my mom said to me, I wish I had listened to your paternal grandmother and had gotten an abortion, because you're not an honor student. You, you know, nobody's going to know who I am. And all the parents, the kids that had honor student, the parents would be standing up, and everybody would know who the parents are and stuff. Nobody's going to know who I am because you're not an honor student, X, Y, and Z. I said to my mom, I said, it's for the students, it's not for the parents. Well, she all of a sudden, what have you, just said, what she said. So on the day of my graduation, I was told that she had thought about wanting an abortion, should have listened to my grandmother to have an abortion. So I went to the back area of my house. We have like an external building, and there's a phone there. And I called my friend and I said, my mom and dad are not going to my graduation. Can you pick me up? Because I had the cap and gown. In order for me to pick up my diploma, I had to be there. So because I had to drop off the cap and gown. So her dad came and picked me up, and I went with my friend to graduation. My mom and dad did show up. I was in line. But that day I told my mom, you are dead to me in my heart. I walked on that graduation. I was crying. Nobody else was crying. I don't know if anybody else saw me cry or what have you, or knew what was going on. I was there sitting in a seat, and they called name by name. No parents stood up. There was honor student there, but nobody stood up. No parents, you know. So I went, got my diploma and everything. I don't remember how I got home. I think my friend's dad drove me home, or anyway, I got home. I didn't go home with my parents. So I arrived home. I walk into the door, and my dad just basically said, "Oh, it really wasn't a big deal." And it wasn't. It truly wasn't. My mom never apologized. They just never talked about it ever again. So when I had that argument with my husband way back when, I used harsh words like I had heard the way my mom spoke to me.
Mm.
So when my husband hit his head hard against the wall, that was a wake-up call, because that was when I realized I spoke to him the way my mom had spoke to me. And that's the way my family, my grandparents have spoken to each other, spoken to my mom and dad, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to say to myself, if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my husband.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was just a wake-up call, because I love my husband. Really, we love each other. We, so it was like, it wasn't him that needed to be changed. It was me. And then when I realized words matter, body language matter, tone of voice matters. And so even the way how I spoke to myself, it mattered, because it wasn't just my mom telling me I deserved to die, or that she should have gotten an abortion. Every time I messed up, I would tell myself, oh gosh, I deserve to die. But I deserve to die.
Mm-hmm.
Every time something didn't work out well, oh God, I would, beat myself up and say, I'm so stupid. I deserve to die. So it's been a journey for me. Hasn't been easy, but like I said, learning my human design, learning more about energy work, and learning about all of this, it has helped me to heal myself, to find my self-worth. And that's what I want for the other woman to do, for the introverted to quiet, because the introverted and quiet, they may not feel comfortable in speaking up and speaking out. They might hold it within themselves, and they might be quiet for, because they were told that what they said didn't matter. And maybe that's the same story they're telling themselves. And then over time, something happens. And, I just want people to be able to step into their power and into their worth. So that way we can all have a way to speak up, get our voices heard, because it matters.
It does. Thank you for sharing that. And you matter.
That's why I named the card the way I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It breaks my heart that you would ever hear that you don't matter and that you're not worthy of being here. I'm the empath in me. My heart's broken, but I'm also, my heart is really happy to just have connected with you and to have an appreciation for what you do, and that special, very personal touch that you put into your work. It comes from a very deep place.
Yeah.
And I hope you know how important you are to the world.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Yeah. And I have to say, so when I heard some certain tone of voice, It would be
Yeah.
like coming from my mom, and then that would create a trigger or some sort of reaction.
Yeah.
I can say, because like it takes work, it's like a journey, there I still have moments,
Yeah.
where, but I can honestly say now that I've worked enough through my story, through the healing, that I can now share the story that I did without giving it such a big
Yeah.
emotion. It's now just like, oh, yes, this happened, and I am able to share it and hopefully help others to be able to heal.
Yeah.
And kind of, I don't want to say detachment, but it's almost like, oh, it's a story and it's
Yep.
no longer playing a big part.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
you've worked through the wound and addressed it, um and I'm grateful that you have, and just thank you for joining me, and for thinking out loud with me, and want to just encourage everyone to think about their own words, and the things that come out of their mouths, yes, and the way that we treat other folks, to take a beat and take some inventory, and come from a place of love, and honesty, and gentleness. We certainly can use more of it in this crazy world that we find ourselves in. It takes you and me, and those of us who are committed to spreading love and connection, and this collective good energy. It takes all of us. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Natalie. I've enjoyed being on your show today. And again, thank you for allowing me to share my story, share what I do, my passion with your audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, folks, for thinking out loud with me and today's guest, Grace C.W. Liu. Given how many choices you have to spend your time, I am honored that you've listened in. And until we visit again, do go out there and live with love and intention. And please, please, please don't let anybody fuck with your flow. Big hugs, big love. Bye, friends.